The inspiration for this arting session was a piece of wall decor. It's from producer Mike's collection of The Nightmare Before Christmas merch, which was kindly gifted by friends, and I thought it would be fun to reproduce the style. So I whipped out my autumn iridori set of Holbein gouache, and just for snits and giggles, I limited the palette to only three colors: indigo, safflower red, and gardenia yellow, plus white. Although this autumn iridori set has a fall-like palette, the three tubes I pulled are essentially primaries: a blue, a red, and a yellow. Hi, I'm Irene, and I couldn't wait to use these paints again. Sure, it's only June, but there have already been rumblings from the Halloween horde. That's right. Spooky merchandise sightings and home haunt ideas have been popping up on my recommended viewing list. The bug is in the air, and I've been infected. I know. It's too soon. Leave it to an art tuber to straddle the edge of good taste. For this project, I chose the same watercolor sketchbook used for the previous fishing lure painting, featuring the same set of paints. Yeah, I toyed with the idea of dedicating this book to just fishing lures, but if there's one thing I know, it's myself, and there's no way I would stick to that plan. There are four lures under my painter's belt, and that's about three more than a normie ought to have. By the way, this is Arch's watercolor paper. It's good stuff, and I'm feeling a little guilty about using it for gouache, because gouache isn't that picky. So maybe next time it should actually be watercolors, yeah? So, intentional slapdashery was the style I was going for with this piece. And to start, I laid down a simple light wash as the foundation. By the end, practically none of it was visible, but during the process, it served as a backdrop and kept me more invested, I think, than a blank white space would. Maybe you could think of it as a conversational icebreaker, like tossing out a topic, one that generates a response, which results in a stimulating discussion. Of course, in this case, I already had the end in mind, since there was an inspiration piece. But painting still involves progression in stages. So while you can't see all of the underlayers in the finished piece, they serve a purpose and help get you to the end. I use a Magello Fusion 33 plastic palette for my Mission Gold watercolors. It works great, and I plan to eventually get another one for my gouache paints. In anticipation of that, I grabbed the inner tray from the one I currently have, and it provided plenty of space for creating watery pools and mixing colors. On Father's Day last Sunday, we had an outing to Pike Place Market in Seattle. It's a super popular tourist attraction, of course, but it seemed even more crowded than normal. It makes sense, though, since it was a weekend and a holiday, and there were three cruise ships in port, and it was free parking day. Yeah, in many places it was elbow to elbow, and there was a line for everything. Producer Mike and I were with relatives, one of whom was a Pike Place first timer. Fortunately, we hit most of the spots we wanted to, including Market Spice, De Laurentiis, the Daily Dozen Donuts, Beecher's Cheese, Piroshki, Golden Age Collectibles, and the notoriously icky Gum Wall. Seriously, I haven't heard ew that much since watching the trophy scene in Everything Everywhere All at Once. By the way, if you haven't seen that movie, I recommend not looking for the clip of that scene. It's not spoilery or anything, it's simply a case of context is everything. At this point, I was just laying down colors. In hindsight, starting with a light sketch would have been smart to figure out placement and proportion, because it was a bit of a struggle to get the face right. But I eventually worked it out through the painting process. Did that mean repainting over some areas? Yes, which can be problematic when you're too impatient to wait for your layers to dry. Several times you'll see that I inadvertently lifted some color, then had to fix the mess that created. It wasn't a huge deal, with this type of piece anyway. But I'm sure you can imagine how a more realistic or detailed project would benefit from a more careful, slower approach. The point is, yes, the face was wonky, even by Jack Skellington standards. The eyes in particular were rubbing me all wrong. But through the magic of gouache, that stuff was mostly fixed by the end. Just want to point out that I used only 3 brushes on this project. The first was a Princeton Snap 3/4 inch angle shader. Then it was a Snap number 8 filbert. And lastly, it was a Princeton Select number 6 flat shader. Although my niece had never been to the market before, I also experienced a few firsts that day. For one, it was my first time having Beecher's mac and cheese. I'd heard stories, but thought, how good can mac and cheese get? Well, pretty dang good, actually. We tried both the regular and the salmon versions. They were nice and saucy, which is how mac and cheese should be, but rarely is. Some of us preferred the salmon, but I preferred the regular. Perhaps because I like my salmon in other ways, such as the nummy smoked salmon pate inside a pastry from Piroshki. Producer Mike and I normally go for one of their beef varieties with either onion or cheese. Now, having tasted the salmon one, I understand why it's a bestseller. Lastly, for firsts, the gum wall. As I stood there, equidistant from all sticky surfaces, it occurred to me, why the heck don't they have a gum vending machine? Maybe there was one, and I just missed it. I mean, I did have mental blinders on, trying to ignore the mass of saliva and DNA. With this piece, the ugly stage lasted a good 3/4 in, of the painting process, I mean. Yeah, it looked like a mess, and things didn't really come together until later, when it came time to define the features. The paints here are Holbein's Artist Gouache, but they aren't the basic colors, which I have as a set of 12 5 milliliter tubes. No, these are from the Iridori series, which is available as 4 sets of 12 15 milliliter tubes. Each set is themed after a season. This is autumn, but there are also winter, spring, and summer. Now, the three colors I chose worked well, I think. I find the indigo particularly attractive, which is a good thing considering there's more indigo here in varying strengths than anything else. Jack Skellington, Nightmare Before Christmas, Tim Burton, Henry Selick, Danny Elfman. I know Elfman for the past several decades has been a film composer of some renown, but I'll always think of him as the frontman of the 1980s band Oingo Boingo. The 80s were my teen years, and I bopped to Private Life with the best of them. But let's talk about the animation. It was stop motion. I think they still call it that. It's what I knew as a kid from the Rankin Bass holiday shows, such as Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And even before that, with things like Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, that incorporated stop-motion footage into live-action adventure films. The biggest name in that field from the 50s through the 80s was Ray Harryhausen. As a kid, I ate that stuff up. Seriously, nothing was cooler to 8-year-old me than seeing the Golden Voyage of Sinbad and that multi-armed statue of Kali come to life. I understand today's stop motion is very different, but even using advanced technology, it still seems magical. I've recently got my hands on some new tubes of Da Vinci watercolor and gouache, and I'm excited about sharing those in upcoming videos. So I'll go ahead and remind you that subscribing to this channel and setting notifications to all will keep you informed of new uploads. That's what I'm told anyway. Hey, I'm not an expert in YouTube's back end stuff. I just art here. Those are the final touches to the face. This is exactly what I meant about things coming together. It was all incoherent blobs until, bam, here's Jack Skellington in all his ghastly glory. The final step was adding a swirly pattern to the background, because, boy, it needed something. The inspiration piece had faint Jack faces scattered in the negative space, but I like the swirls better. So while recording this voiceover, I had some of the cinnamon orange black tea I picked up from Market Spice at Pike Place. That is their signature blend, by the way, and it seemed so much more intense than I remembered. Of course, that might be due to a faulty memory. In any case, I came up with a workaround. Using a larger than usual mug, I steeped 1 bag of cinnamon orange and 1 bag of Bigelow's Constant Comment. Then I added a pack of Splenda and some non-dairy creamer. Et voila! A delightful drinking experience. Not too spicy and not too bland. It was just right. While I'm an admirer of the film The Nightmare Before Christmas, I couldn't tell you a bunch of little-known facts about its production. I'll leave that for the obsessive fans. There are quite a few videos out there that can tell you things like how many years it took to film the movie. What's that? 3.5? Cool. Thanks, Producer Mike. I'm happy to share this painting in gouache, and I'm not too proud to say I'm happy to find inspiration from other sources, whether it's a movie or a conversation or a piece of wall decor. Thanks for being here. Until next time, maybe try some intentional slapdashery in the safety of your art space, I mean. and stay inspired, my friends.